7.4 is the lesson, Confederation discussions. How was Confederation, so the union of the colonies, finally achieved? We'll find that out and a little bit more. So stick around and let's learn something. How was Confederation finally achieved? This is lesson 7.4 in our story of Canada. We are just about to figure out how and why and when Canada finally becomes a country. This is the lesson. This is what we've been waiting for all unit. This is where Canada officially becomes the country of Canada. So the lesson here is all about discussing Confederation. And leading up to this point in our history, Confederation feelings, they were hit and miss. Some people really wanted to join Confederation. Others, you know what, not so much. Tons of questions were around, like, what are we going to do? And there was heated debates and passionate debates about whether or not we should join or we should not join. So it's safe to say feelings definitely were mixed. The people that were having to work all of this out were the politicians. They needed to figure things out. And deadlock at the time was blocking Confederation from happening. And really, at the end of the day, each of the 7 colonies needed to make a decision on whether or not they wanted to join with Confederation. But first, we need to break the deadlock. And what happens here is George Brown, this individual right here, he is the leader of the Clear Grits. And in 1864, he convinces his party to join alongside and vote with the Liberal Conservatives and Les Bleus. And his whole plan was federalism. And in federalism, it's a system of government that exists today. Each colony keeps their own government to run their own affairs, right? What's the Canadian government going to do running some project out in the Maritimes that is only for the people of the Maritime? So each colony is going to keep track of their individual affairs. The central government, so this is the federal government, they will deal with issues and matters that arise for the whole union. And this was Brown's plan. This was the plan of George Brown. So this would help the Maritimes. They would reduce their concerns for what would happen to them, because the Canadian government will control everything that matters to the whole union, whereas the Maritimes can still conduct their individual governments and watch their own budgets and things like that, which would make them happy. So this eventually does break the deadlock that is happening between Canada East and Canada West that we heard about in the last couple of lessons and leading up to today. So now things are moving along really nice. And there's a meeting that takes place in Charlottetown. New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, they decide to meet in Charlottetown to plan their own union. So as talks of Confederation were happening, the Maritimes were also talking about maybe creating their own country, creating their own union. So Canada East and Canada West, they hear about this. They get word that this is about to happen, that this is going to take place. And they ask New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island if they can come and join this meeting in Charlottetown. So all these politicians are sitting there and they're listening to this idea of a whole union between the British North American colonies. So they say their piece, they do their thing, they talk to the politicians there, and then they decide that they're going to meet later in Quebec City, and they come up with 72 resolutions. So 72 things that we need to agree on for this union to take place. So they present these 72 resolutions, and this is the founding of our new country. This is the founding of Canada. This is the founding of our current level and system of government. So they present this to the various politicians from all the different assemblies, and then now it's up to the assemblies to decide what is going to happen. Will these individual assemblies in each of these colonies decide? You have a picture here. This is right out of your textbook. These are the key players of the conferences that were being held in 1864. Okay, we've got MacDonald, Georges Etienne Cartier, George Brown, Charles Tupper, he's the Premier of Nova Scotia. We have not talked about him. Leonard Tilley, the Premier of New Brunswick. We also haven't talked about him, nor have we talked about the Premier of Prince Edward Island, J.H. Gray. But we have talked to MacDonald, Cartier, and Brown. But this is them. This is a painting, a sketch of them sitting in the conferences taking place in Charlottetown, and then eventually again in Quebec City. But now it's the time of the great debate. Are we going to join Union, or are we going to not join Union? So the debate begins. So all of the politicians that were attended these conferences, they need to go back to their colonies, and they need to convince the people if joining Confederation, creating the Dominion of Canada, the Union of Canada, the country of Canada is a good idea. And the people in favor of Union are Canada East and Canada West, so Cartier and MacDonald. Those against Union are Nova Scotia, PEI, and Canada East. Okay, those individuals. So Cartier from Canada East is for Union, but Dorion from Canada East is against Union. And these people are going back and they're trying to convince their constituents, their voters, whether or not it's a good idea to join. The interesting one here is that of Canada East. That is going to be an interesting one because they are for and they are against. So they went back, they did all these things. Okay, so what did the unions, or what did the colonies finally decide on Union? Well, 4 colonies were in favor of creating Canada. The beginning of Canada in 1867. Eventually, Ontario, which is Canada West, Quebec, which was Canada East, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia decide it is best if they form the Dominion of Canada. So they agree, they vote, and they are the original 4 provinces of Canada. And you can see on the map here, this is what Canada looked like in 1867. The United States still to the south, and then Canada is in orange, and then the rest of the British-owned territory is in green. Looks a lot different than the Canada today. Prince Edward Island, they felt as though they would not benefit by joining Union because they were so small, and they felt it was best, you know what, we're going to stay out of Confederation. But years later, in 1873, they changed their mind. Canada welcomes them into their union, into Confederation. Newfoundland, they felt that they had so little in common with all the other colonies that they decided they are not going to join into Confederation until way afterwards in 1949. That is not a typo. Newfoundland did not join Canada. It did not join Confederation until 1949. Crazy. Now we've got the Union. Okay, we've got agreements and people agreeing from those 4 colonies. So now we need to get to work. John A. Macdonald, he pushed the hardest for this union to take place. And he was a strong believer that there is a partnership that exists between the Canadiens and the English Canadians. And this partnership is going to be essential for Canada surviving and making it through and lasting the test of time. So he aligned with Canada East. The Georges Etienne Cartier of Canada East was in strong favor of the Union. So that's a partner for John A. Macdonald. So he aligns with Cartier. Even though union was George Brown's idea, he came forward, this was his thing with federalism and all that kind of stuff, it was Macdonald who was doing the pushing. Okay, it was Macdonald that was the architect of Confederation. And Macdonald, after the colonies decided that they want to join Confederation, he heads over to London and he attends the London Conference in 1866. And this is where Canada officially becomes, on paper, it gets signed over from the British, and they sign the British North America Act. You'll hear this in textbooks and online and stuff like that as the B&A Act of 1867. And officially, Canada becomes a country. They celebrated on July 1st, 1867. Proclamation goes out. Big, massive party. Canada is its own country. They break from Britain to an extent. They break from Britain without a shot being fired. That's a pretty big achievement. That's pretty big. George Etienne Cartier, going to do a little zoom in on him here. He worked very closely with Macdonald. He was from Canada East, and he believed in this idea of union. This is a quote from John A. Macdonald. Cartier was bold as a lion. He was just the man I wanted. Without him, Confederation would not have been carried. So George Etienne Cartier, he was a key player, key role in the creation of Canada in Confederation because he was from Canada East. Actually, his family was in Lower Canada before it was even Canada East. They were in Lower Canada for around 200 years. He grew up and then he learned to be a lawyer. In his younger days, he was fighting with the Patriots or Patriot during the rebellion. He was exiled. He came back. He won political office in 1848. He worked really hard to create the French Civil Code, and he worked tremendously hard for maintaining French rights and instilling it into Confederation. And those rights are still there today. So like John A. Macdonald said, without him, Cartier, Confederation would not have been carried forward. All right, I want you to head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.